Dr. W testified that Mr. Godejohn met Gypsy at the Christian Dating for Free website in 2012. After reading Nick's profile, Gypsy contacted him first. Ooh, we're getting to the juicy juice now, guys. The juice. Gypsy contacted him first. They messaged on the website for a day and a half before Gypsy suggested that they move to Facebook to continue their relationship. Dr. W testified that, as is typical with autistic people, Mr. Godejohn did not initiate but was responding to the direction he was getting. Mr. Godejohn kept a journal between 2012 and ooh, I want to see this journal. Show us the journal. Mr. Godejohn kept a journal between 2012 and 2015 that detailed his online relationship with Gypsy. Dr. W testified that the journal reflects Mr. Godejohn's ASD/Asperger's because it mostly recounts fact instead of qualitative emotional content. He wrote good night to himself. Once he wrote, note to self, always keep Gypsy close, for she is everything I ever wanted, end quote. He also noted that he and Gypsy were becoming in sync with each other by their communication. The journal reflects that the relationship was all-encompassing to Mr. Godejohn. Dr. W received the large number of videos that Gypsy sent to Mr. Godejohn. The large number of videos that Gypsy sent to Mr. Godejohn. Please release these videos. Okay. The large number of videos that Gypsy sent to Mr. Godejohn and the ones that Mr. Godejohn sent back. The video spanned from February 2013 to May 26, 2015. Also communicated with Nick from her, Demona Love Slave account. I need to know more about Demona. Gypsy, can you get back to me on that? Thank you. In many videos, she was depicted in role-playing personas, as well as being naked and masturbating. Oh, Gypsy. Gypsy. Why, Gypsy? Why? Lord have mercy. Demona. They both took turns being dominant and submissive, or, quote, master and, quote, slave. Gypsy told Mr. Godejohn when it was his turn to be master or slave. This is wow. Dr. W found that the videos from Gypsy to Mr. Godejohn were instructional videos. Interesting. Autistic people receive their information about the social requirement of relationships from the structure of videos rather than the outside world. Mr. Godejohn was receiving his information about the requirements for his social relationship from the videos and not from anywhere else. The various persona were feeding Mr. Godejohn instructions. Oh my God. On the subject of love, for example, she instructed him, if you love me, you will do this. If you love me, you will do that. The instruction videos demonstrated how to stab somebody. They were instruction videos that told him what the rewards would be for appropriate behavior, and they were instructional videos that told him what the punishment would be for behavior that the person did not like. It was a process of shaping a person who had social deficits into action of some form that would demonstrate his love for her. Dr. W testified that the videos would affect Mr. Godejohn differently than a non-autistic person because the videos would totally define Nick's reality. There would not be a separate Nick out in the real world who could second guess his role playing. When she was in the role playing situations, he, quote, end quote, he was totally there. He was totally there in an instructional setting where she laid the ground rules for how he was to relate to her. Wow. Show the videos, put the evidence out. We need to see it. Give this kid a new trial. This guy needs a new trial. Wow. Dr. W found Gypsy's videos to be fascinating because each role had its own set of rules. Get ready for this. So you had Demona, that was the master who was telling Nick that, quote, if you do what I want you to do, there will be sex and there will be favors. If you don't, there will be punishment. I'll take away Gypsy. Oh my God. Pause for a moment. Please, for a moment. Hold up. Wait a minute. This is Demona on a video chat with Nicholas telling him, I'm going to use the one card that I have over you, and that card is Gypsy.
I use the one card that I have over you. I use the one card that I have over you. The one card that I have over you. I use the one card that I have over you.
Well, that changes the tone of that video after reading that. All right, let's continue. So you had Demona. That was the master who was telling Nick that, quote, if you do what I want you to do, there will be sex and there will be favors. If you don't, there will be punishment. I'll take away Gypsy. And then we have this later character introduced that basically shows up in a red wig and gives him instructions about how to hurt people, and that we're going to rob and steal and all the rest of the stuff. So to me, it was just a very organized attempt to manipulate someone who didn't have the social judgment to really suspend belief. Whoa. Dr. W testified that role playing is the primary way that people with ASD use to build their relationships with others. The actual physical social interaction with people is too threatening, has too much information, so they can't process it. There are treatment programs that are based on role-playing games online. People like Nick are still autistic even when they are role-playing and losing themselves to the characters. After reviewing all the videos and messages between Gypsy and Mr. Godejohn, Dr. W concluded that, for the most part, it was a process of shaping Mr. Godejohn. It was a process of taking a person with a social deficit and shaping his behavior by sending the instructions that if he loved her, he would do what all of her personas asked him to do. Dr. W testified that Gypsy was Mr. Godejohn's hyperfocus, and she made herself conditional upon his doing what she said. It was part of the process of indoctrination, which is well established in psychology and the military. It is typical for people with Asperger's to have hyperfocus periods of time. Taking her away would be very threatening and upsetting to him. Dr. W reviewed the texts between Gypsy and Mr. Godejohn from the night of the murder. He found that they were a continuation of the pattern where she gives him instructions. The 2 years of role-playing were a foundation from the events that took place on the night of the murder. They were part of programming a person with an autistic disorder to follow instructions and engage in a behavior based on the fact that he would lose his object of fascination if he did not. The behavior was always equated with love because that is the only way an autistic person would be able to understand this. In one video, Gypsy went into her mother's bedroom and made a stabbing motion over the bed. It was significant to Dr. W because it was a demonstration of how Mr. Godejohn was supposed to engage in the behavior that would end up in the death of the victim. The video was dated about 3 weeks before the murder. In one video, Gypsy went into her mother's bedroom and made a stabbing motion over the bed. It was significant to Dr. W because it was a demonstration of how Mr. Godejohn was supposed to engage in the behavior that would lead to the death of the victim. That video was dated about 3 weeks before the murder. About 3 days later, Gypsy sent Mr. Godejohn another video called Ruby's Introduction to Her Perfect Man. Oh, Lord, we getting into it now. Video called Ruby's Introduction to Her Perfect Man. Ruby was a new character Gypsy introduced to Nick. Ruby introduces herself as a sociopath. Oh, God. She says, how would Gypsy even know what a sociopath is? Oh, Lord. Wow. Just wow. She says that she herself is a person that breaks the rules, violates the rules, creates mayhem, and she basically tells Nicholas that she is his perfect match. Quote, "We are together, and together we are going to go," end quote. Essentially, on what she describes as a, quote, crime spree. And we're going to rob, we're going to steal, and we're going to do all of these things because you are my perfect match and we will be together. So it's sort of like the culmination of the training, which, again, to just remind everybody, is behavior, behavior, behavior. Quote, "If you love me, this is what you'll do," end quote. So Ruby was introduced to basically summarize that up. So in case there was any confusion, if that was what Nick understood. Dr. W reviewed the interrogation videos from when Mr. Godejohn was first arrested. When Mr. Godejohn was waiting for detectives to arrive, he periodically mentioned that he was worried about Gypsy. He was still fixated on her at the time, and an autistic person will do anything to get their fixation. Dr. W testified that multiple times Gypsy turned down Mr. Godejohn's proposal to run away instead of commit murder, which is part of the process of training. She eliminated alternatives until the only option left was what she wanted him to do. When Mr. Godejohn arrived in Springfield on the night of the murder, it was his intention to talk Gypsy out of it and run away. Oh, that's interesting. He did not bring anything with him, and Gypsy provided it all to him. He tried to talk her out of it, but he was not able to because she said there was no other option. Dr. W testified that when Mr. Godejohn was walking to the victim's room, he was having an argument with himself, which is typical of someone on the spectrum because they get overwhelmed and overstimulated. The argument in his head leads to, quote, autistic panic. When the autistic person does not think well, they panic when things get out of their control, and sometimes they are hospitalized for it. It is a typical reaction when they feel pressured by competing things or things outside of their control. Like the expert at trial, Dr. W was not allowed to testify to the ultimate conclusion on the element of deliberation. As an offer of proof, however, Dr. W was allowed to answer. Nicholas was able to answer Nicholas's thinking at the time of the murder was characterized by the same features and factors that Nicholas's thinking was always characterized by because he's autistic and because that's how he processes information. If Nicholas, his fixation on Gypsy, would have characterized everything that he did, and it would have colored everything that he did. I can't state whether that meets whatever criteria you guys are talking about, but I would say with a lot of certainty, that was his preeminent thought at the time. Dr. W elaborated that Mr. Godejohn's thinking would have been on the things that were causing him the stress, and his focus would have been on the argument he was having with himself. Dr. W reviewed Dr. D's CV and did not see a lot of experience in treating autism, although Dr. D did report evaluating people who were autistic in certain circumstances. Dr. W did not think that Dr. D purposely mischaracterized anything at the trial. But his use of the word, quote, mild, misrepresented the level of disruption in Mr. Godejohn's life. It left the impression that the autism was not so bad. Like Nick could go about his day, for the most part, like anybody else, which is not accurate. Mr. Godejohn is never able to think or act without the deficits of an autistic person. On cross-examination, Dr. W testified that Mr. Godejohn is able to think, but all of his thoughts are colored or characterized by ASD. Gypsy initially brought up the idea of killing her mother in a joking manner, and she got progressively more serious about it. Mr. Godejohn was against the idea, and he asked her many times if she was certain. About 1 year prior to the murder, Nick told a Facebook friend that he thought Gypsy was crazy for wanting to kill her mom. Mr. Godejohn justified the plan by bringing up how badly the victim treated Gypsy. About a month before the murder, Nick told a Facebook friend, quote, me and the one I'm with are defying the laws of nature to stay together. It is as bad as can be. I won't tell you what I have to do to stay with her, but I will do it if it means keeping her. Dr. W testifies that his statement is exactly consistent with what Dr. W had been saying about TR 173. Dr. W had reviewed and was aware of the alternative plans that had been considered, as well as Nick's internet searches to prepare for the murder. Dr. W recalled Nick's statement that there was a moment when Nick stood outside the victim's bedroom door and something clicked, and he realized he had given his word and was bound by it. Mr. Godejohn cut the back of the victim's neck so she would die quickly, and he briefly thought about having sex with the victim before deciding not to. Dr. W acknowledged that Victor, in quotes, because that was what Nicholas said, he had an alter name, Victor, and that was his evil side, was Mr. Godejohn's, quote, master character, and Mr. Godejohn had previously used that character with another girlfriend prior to Gypsy. Dr. W testifies that Nick described the argument in his head like having a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder. However, it would be a mischaracterization to think they are two rational actors having a rational conversation. It was turmoil from the pressure of two competing sets of thoughts, and Mr. Godejohn would have described it as arguing because his vocabulary was limited. From the pressure between love and the general rules of society, Nick went back and forth and reached a point where he snapped. Dr. W would not characterize it as a conversation in Nick's head because it was more like pressure. Ooh, okay. Yeah, I think that's about it because now it's going to go into the plea offers, and I'm just going to stop right there. Yeah. Wow. Wow. I want to see all these freaking videos. Oh my God.